The alien warrior fell to her knees as the sounds of battle finally faded away. The ground beneath her was cold and hard, pressing through the cracks in her damaged armor. Smoke drifted slowly across the open field, carrying the sharp smell of burned metal and broken machines. The sky above was gray, heavy with clouds, as if the world itself was tired. Her name was Kara, and she could no longer stand. Her armor, once strong and proud, was shattered in many places. Deep marks ran across its surface, and parts of it no longer responded to her movements. One arm hung useless at her side. Her breathing was slow and painful, each breath feeling heavier than the last. Her vision blurred at the edges and the world seemed to tilt. Kara had trained her entire life for moments like this. She had been taught to fight until her last breath, to never surrender, to never expect mercy, especially not from humans. She pressed one hand into the dirt to keep herself upright, but her strength failed her. Her fingers slipped and she collapsed fully onto the ground. The cold spread through her body quickly, seeping into her bones. This is the end, she thought. She did not feel panic. Only a deep, quiet acceptance. Among her people, death in battle was not feared. It was expected. It was honored. What was feared was capture. What was feared was falling into human hands. Kara had heard the story since she was young. Humans were unpredictable. Humans were harsh. Humans showed kindness only when it served them. To be wounded and found by humans meant pain, experiments, or slow death. She had prepared herself for this moment long ago. Her breathing grew weaker. The noise around her faded even more. She could no longer hear distant machines or damaged structures collapsing. Only the sound of her own breath remained. Then she heard footsteps. They were not the heavy steps of her own kind. These were lighter, faster, careful. More than one pair. Humans. Kara's body tensed weakly. She tried to move, to reach for her weapon, but it was gone. Lost somewhere on the battlefield. Her fingers curled uselessly against the dirt. The footsteps stopped close by. She could sense them standing over her. She did not look. She refused to give them that satisfaction. Slowly, with what little strength she had left, Kara closed her eyes. Ready. She waited for pain. She waited for rough hands, for harsh voices, for the final blow. Instead, she heard something unexpected. Easy, a human voice said. Come. Oh. Not loud at all. She's alive. Another voice replied, quieter. Barely. Kara's mind struggled to understand. They were speaking about her. Not to her. Not with anger. With focus. A shadow passed over her closed eyes. She felt a presence kneel beside her. Something light brushed against her arm. Not rough. Careful. Her heart began to race, confused. Why are they not striking? Vitals are weak, the first voice said. But stable enough. Command said no prisoners, the second voice answered. There was a pause. Kara waited. Then the first voice spoke again, firm this time. Command isn't here. I am. We're taking her in. Silence followed. Kara felt hands gently turn her onto her back. Pain flared briefly, sharp but controlled, then faded into a dull ache. Whoever was touching her knew what they were doing. She wanted to scream. She wanted to fight. But her body would not obey. Her breathing became shallow. The sky above her was the last thing she saw when her eyes fluttered open for a moment. Gray clouds moved slowly, calm and uncaring. So this is how it ends, she thought. Not in honor. Not in battle. But captured. Her vision darkened again. She felt herself being lifted from the ground. Her body moved, weightless and strange, as if she no longer belonged to herself. She felt warmth around her, something placed over her to shield her from the cold. A human face appeared briefly in her fading sight. A young man, his face marked with dirt and tired lines. His eyes were focused, not cruel. You'll be okay, he said softly, though she did not understand the words. His tone reached her anyway. She wanted to reject it, wanted to hate him. But she was too tired. Her consciousness slipped, fading like the last echo of battle. The last thing Kara felt before the darkness took her was not pain. It was steadiness. Strong hands holding her carefully, refusing to let her fall any further. And then nothing at all. She woke slowly as if rising from deep water. At first, there was only darkness and a soft sense of warmth. Her body felt heavy but not in pain. That alone confused her. Pain was expected. Pain was normal after battle. Her eyes opened a little. Light filled her vision, not bright or sharp, but gentle and pale. It did not hurt her eyes. She blinked once, then again, trying to understand where she was. The ceiling above her was smooth and white, curved slightly, with small lights set into it like calm stars. She breathed in. The air was clean. Too clean. Her chest rose and fell without effort. There was no smoke, no dust, no bitter taste of metal. The air felt warm and steady, filling her lungs easily. That frightened her more than pain would have. She tried to move. Her body answered slowly, but it answered. Her fingers twitched. Her legs were heavy, but she could feel them. Something soft rested beneath her, supporting her weight. She realized she was lying on a bed, covered by warm sheets. Sheets. Her heart began to race. This was not a prison cell. This was not a holding cage. This was not how captives were treated. She turned her head slightly, scanning the room. The walls were light in color, smooth and clean. Soft machines stood nearby, connected to her by thin lines and small sensors. They made quiet sounds, steady and calm like breathing. No alarms. No guards. No weapons pointed at her. Where am I? Memory returned in pieces. The battlefield. The cold ground. The human voices. Strong hands lifting her. She tried to sit up. Instantly, a gentle pressure pressed her back down. Not forceful. Not painful. Just firm enough to stop her. Easy, a voice said. She froze. The voice was calm. Female. Close. The alien warrior turned her head again, this time toward the sound. A human woman stood beside the bed. She wore light-colored clothing, simple and clean. Her hair was tied back neatly. Her face was focused but not hard. Her eyes were watching the machines, not the warrior herself. One hand rested lightly near the alien's arm, ready but not gripping. "You've been unconscious for a while," the woman said gently. "You're safe." The warrior's muscles tensed under the sheets. Her eyes narrowed. She searched the woman's face for signs of deception, of cruelty, of control. She found none. The woman noticed the tension immediately and slowly removed her hand, stepping back half a step to give space. "My name is Sarah," she said, touching her own chest briefly. "I'm a medical officer." The alien warrior did not answer. Her throat felt dry, but her voice was still strong inside her mind. She watched every movement Sarah made, ready for danger. Sarah moved slowly around the bed, checking the machines. She adjusted a setting, then nodded to herself. Her hands were steady. Experienced. "You were badly hurt," Sarah continued. "We treated your wounds. You're healing well." The words did not fully make sense, but the tone did. This was not an interrogation. This was information. The warrior looked down at herself. Her armor was gone. In its place was simple clothing, soft and loose. She expected to feel exposed, but instead she felt protected. Her eyes widened slightly. No chains held her arms. No restraints locked her legs. Thin lines connected her to the machines, but they were light, easy to remove. She tested her arm again, lifting it slowly. Moved. Weak but whole. Confusion flooded her mind. "What?" Sarah noticed her movement and smiled faintly. "That's good. You're stronger today." The warrior finally spoke. Her voice was rough but clear. "Why am I alive?" Sarah paused. She turned fully toward her now, meeting her eyes directly. There was no fear in her expression. No anger. "Because you were alive when we found you," Sarah said simply. The answer struck harder than any weapon. That was it. No long explanation. No judgment. No conditions. Because she was alive. The warrior looked away, her thoughts spinning. This went against everything she had been taught. Enemies were not saved. Enemies were not healed. Mercy was weakness. Care was wasted on those who would fight you again. Sarah returned to checking the machines, giving her space to think. The room remained quiet except for the soft sounds of life support systems. Minutes passed. The warrior studied her surroundings more closely now. She noticed a small window on one wall, showing a dark field of stars. They were far from any planet. A ship then. A human ship. Fear stirred again, but it was weaker now, mixed with something else. Curiosity. Sarah noticed her gaze. "We're on a medical vessel," she said. "You're not in danger here." The warrior let out a slow breath. "My people," she began, then stopped. The words felt heavy. Sarah waited. She did not push. "My people believe humans are cruel," the warrior said finally. "That capture is worse than death." Sarah's expression softened. She pulled a chair closer and sat down beside the bed, keeping a respectful distance. "I know," she said quietly. "Many believe the same about you." The warrior looked back at her sharply. Sarah met her gaze without flinching. But beliefs don't always tell the full story. Silence filled the space between them. The warrior's thoughts drifted. She remembered training halls, instructors speaking of honor and strength. She remembered warnings about humans, spoken with fear and certainty. And now she lay in a human bed, breathing clean air, healed by human hands. Her voice was quieter when she spoke again. Why no chains? Sarah looked surprised by the question, then thoughtful. You're injured, she said. You're not a threat. And even if you were, this isn't how we do things. The warrior searched her face again. You trust me? Sarah shook her head gently. Not yet. Honesty. Clear and calm. But I respect you, Sarah added. You fought. You survived. That matters. The warrior felt something tighten in her chest. Not pain. Something unfamiliar. Respect. She closed her eyes briefly, overwhelmed by exhaustion. When she opened them again, Sarah was still there, still calm, still watching the machines instead of her. You can rest, Sarah said. I'll be here. The warrior hesitated, then let her eyes close again. For the first time since the battle, she did not feel the need to stay alert. The room was quiet. The air was warm. The danger she expected did not come. As sleep took her once more, a single thought echoed in her mind. This was not death. And whatever this was, it was something she had never been taught to expect. Ari waited. She lay still on the bed, her body covered by warm sheets, her breathing slow and steady. The room around her was quiet, filled with soft light and the gentle sound of machines. Time passed, though she could not tell how much. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like moments. She waited for pain. She waited for punishment. Among her people, survival after defeat came with a price. A wounded warrior was questioned, tested, sometimes broken to prove loyalty or strength. Mercy was rare, and kindness was often a mask for control. So Ari stayed alert, even while resting. Her eyes followed every movement. Her muscles stayed tense beneath the sheets. She expected the moment when the calm would end. It did not. Instead, the door to the room opened quietly, and a human man stepped inside. He was tall but not threatening. His movements were careful, measured. He wore clothing similar to Sarah's, marked with simple symbols. He noticed Ari watching him and stopped near the doorway. Good morning, he said softly. Ari did not respond. The man smiled slightly, not offended. He stepped closer but not too close and held up his hands so she could see them clearly. My name is Kyle, he said, tapping his chest. I'm a medic. Ari studied him. He did not carry a weapon. His eyes were tired but kind. There was no fear in them, no anger. Kyle checked the machines beside her bed, reading the information carefully. He nodded once, pleased. You're healing well, he said. Better than we expected. Ari frowned. Expected. Kyle glanced at her. Your injuries were serious. You're strong. The word caught her off guard. Strong. Humans were not supposed to speak that way to enemies. Kyle moved closer and gently adjusted a bandage on her arm. Ari flinched slightly, but there was no pain. His hands were warm and steady, practiced. He worked with care as if her body mattered. She watched him closely. Why are you doing this? She asked. Kyle paused, then looked at her directly. Because you're hurt. That is not an answer, Ari said. Kyle smiled a little. It is to us. He finished adjusting the bandage and stepped back. We save the wounded, he said simply. That's our job. Ari's eyes narrowed. Even enemies? Kyle nodded. Even enemies. The words settled into the room like a weight. Ari turned her head away, staring at the wall. Her thoughts raced. This made no sense. Healing an enemy meant risking future harm. It meant wasting resources. It meant weakness. At least that was what she had been taught. Kyle pulled a chair closer and sat down. He did not crowd her. He sat where she could see him easily. You don't trust us, he said. Ari looked back at him. No. Kyle accepted that without reaction. That's fair. He sat quietly for a moment, then spoke again. Pain and punishment don't make people better. They just make them afraid. Ari laughed softly, without humor. Fear makes warriors strong. Kyle shook his head slowly. Fear makes people desperate. The difference in their beliefs was clear, hanging between them. Kyle reached for a tray nearby and picked up a small container. You need to eat, he said, placing it within her reach. Ari looked at it but did not touch it. Is there a cost? Kyle frowned slightly. A cost? Yes, she said. For your care. Kyle leaned back in his chair, thinking. No. Ari searched his face, expecting a lie. She found none. You expect nothing? She pressed. Kyle shrugged. We expect you to heal. That is all. That's enough. Silence returned. Ari's mind struggled to understand. Everything she had learned said this was wrong, dangerous, foolish, and yet, she was alive, healing, treated with respect. Kyle stood and walked to the window looking out at the stars. You know, he said quietly, some of us have fought your people before. Ari stiffened. Then why help me? Kyle turned back to her. Because war ends when someone decides it has to. Ari frowned. That is not how war works. Kyle smiled sadly. It should be. He checked her vitals again then nodded. You'll be able to sit up soon. Maybe walk if recovery keeps going well. Ari hesitated. You are not afraid I will attack you? Kyle considered this. If you wanted to, you would have tried already. That was true. She had moments where she could have caused harm. She had not. The realization surprised her. Kyle stood to leave then paused at the door. If you need anything, he said, just ask. The door closed softly behind him. Ari lay back against the bed, her thoughts heavy. She remembered her training halls. The words of her commanders. Humans were cruel. Humans only understood force. Humans pretended to be kind to gain advantage. But Kyle had gained nothing. Sarah had gained nothing. They had risked themselves. Used time and supplies. Offered care freely. What? Over the next few days, Ari's strength returned slowly. Humans came and went, always calm, always respectful. They explained what they were doing before touching her. They asked permission when possible. They listened when she spoke. Kyle often returned, sometimes to treat her wounds, sometimes just to talk. He spoke of simple things. The ship. The stars. His home world. He never asked about her people's defenses or plans. One day Ari asked him, what if I return and fight you again? Kyle did not answer right away. He finished adjusting a sensor and sat down. Then I hope, he said slowly, that one day you remember this moment. That would not stop me, Ari said. Kyle nodded. Maybe not. But it might stop someone else. That answer stayed with her. Ari began to see patterns. Humans argued but calmly. They followed rules but questioned them. They showed care even when it cost them something. Strength, she realized, did not always look like dominance. Sometimes it looked like restraint. Sometimes it looked like mercy. As her wounds healed, Ari felt something else change inside her. Not her loyalty. Not her pride. Her certainty. She no longer felt sure that her people's way was the only way. She no longer felt sure that fear was the strongest tool. One evening, as the ship drifted through quiet space, Ari looked at Kyle and asked a final question. Why do humans save enemies? Kyle smiled gently. Because today's enemy is still alive tomorrow. And tomorrow, things can change. Ari looked out at the stars, endless and silent. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to question everything she had been taught. And she did not feel weaker for it. Ari stood on her own feet for the first time since the battle. The floor beneath her felt firm and steady, not cold like the ground where she had fallen. Her legs trembled but they did not fail her. She took a slow breath, feeling the strength return to her body little by little. Sarah stood close, ready to help, but she did not touch Ari unless needed. You're doing well, Sarah said calmly. Ari nodded once. Standing felt strange. 4 days she had been lying down, watching the ceiling, listening to soft voices and quiet machines. Now the room felt larger. More real. Kyle watched from a short distance away, his arms crossed loosely. He smiled when Ari took a careful step forward. Easy, he said. No rush. Ari took another step. Then another. Each movement reminded her that she was alive. Not trapped. Not broken. When she finally sat back down, her breathing was fast but steady. She looked up at Sarah and Kyle, waiting. Sarah exchanged a glance with Kyle, then turned back to Ari. There's something we need to tell you. Ari's body tensed without her meaning to. Important words often came before punishment or control. Sarah noticed and raised one hand gently. You're not in trouble. Kyle stepped forward. You're strong enough now, he said. Strong enough to leave. Ari blinked. Leave? Yes, Kyle said. We're taking you close to a neutral zone. From there, you're free to go wherever you choose. The words did not make sense at first. Free. No chains. No guards. No conditions. Ari searched their faces for deception. She found none. You are releasing me? She asked slowly. Yes, Sarah said. As soon as you're ready. Ari's heart began to beat faster. This was not how it worked. Enemies were traded. Used. Studied. Controlled. Not released. You do not fear what I will do? Ari asked. Kyle shrugged lightly. We've thought about it. And? And we still believe it's the right thing. Silence filled the room. Ari looked down at her hands. They were steady now. Strong again. She could fight. She could escape. She could return to her people and tell them everything. This was her chance. Yet, she did not move. Days ago, she would have taken freedom without hesitation. Now she felt something holding her back. Not force. Not fear. Curiosity. I do not understand humans, Ari said quietly. Kyle smiled. You're not alone. Ari looked up at him. If I leave now, I will never understand. Sarah tilted her head slightly. Are you saying you want to stay? Yes, Ari said. The answer surprised even her. For a while. Kyle raised an eyebrow. No one is asking you to. I know, Ari said. That is why I choose it. Sarah smiled, warm and genuine. Then you're welcome to stay. No demand for loyalty. No oath. No promise. Just acceptance. Over the next days, Ari moved freely through parts of the ship. She was not followed closely. Doors opened when she approached. Crew members greeted her politely, some curious, some cautious, but none hostile. She noticed how humans lived together in small spaces. They joked quietly. They argued without anger. They worked long hours and rested when needed. Rank existed, but it did not crush those below it. Kyle showed her the medical bay, explaining each tool with patience. Sarah invited her to sit and watch procedures, always asking first. You don't have to, Sarah said more than once. But I want to, Ari replied. She began to help in small ways. Holding tools. Cleaning surfaces. Simple tasks. No one treated her like a servant or a threat. One evening, Ari stood near a wide window watching stars slide past. Kyle joined her, holding 2 cups. Drink? He asked. She accepted it. The liquid was warm and bitter. She did not mind. Why did you really let me stay? Ari asked. Kyle took a moment before answering. Because understanding goes both ways. Ari nodded slowly. My people believe respect comes from fear. Kyle looked at her. And now? Ari thought about it. About Sarah's calm hands. Kyle's honest answers. The quiet choice to let her go. I think respect can come from trust, she said. Kyle smiled. As days passed, Ari felt something change deep inside her. Her fear faded, replaced by something stronger and steadier. Respect. Not because humans were powerful, but because they chose restraint when they did not have to. When the time finally came for her to leave, Ari stood at the exit of the ship, fully healed, fully free. She turned back to face Sarah and Kyle. You changed me, she said simply. Sarah shook her head gently. You changed yourself. Ari stepped forward into open space, no longer afraid. Ari returned to her people on a quiet transport ship that crossed familiar stars. The journey felt long, not because of distance, but because her thoughts were heavy. She stood alone near a small window, watching light move across the dark. Her body was healed. Her strength had returned. Yet something inside her had changed in a way she could not easily explain. When the ship reached her home world, she felt the weight of many eyes. News had traveled ahead of her. A warrior lost in battle had returned alive. Not rescued by her own kind. Saved by humans. The landing field was wide and open. Stone towers rose in the distance, strong and old. Guards waited in clean lines, their faces serious. Ari stepped down from the ship, her posture straight, her movements calm. She wore simple clothing, not armor. She carried no weapon. The elders gathered soon after. They formed a half-circle in a quiet hall, light flowing in from above. Their faces showed shock, relief, and suspicion. Ari stood before them, steady and silent, waiting to be asked. You were reported dead, one elder said. I was close, Ari answered. Another elder leaned forward. You were found by humans. Yes. A low murmur passed through the room. You escaped? A voice asked. Ari shook her head. I was released. The room fell silent. Released? The elder repeated. Yes, Ari said. When I was strong enough to stand, they offered me freedom. They did not threaten me. They did not ask for loyalty. Some elders exchanged uneasy glances. Ari took a breath and began to speak. She told them about waking in a clean room filled with soft light. She told them about warm sheets and quiet machines. About a human woman named Sarah, whose hands were calm and careful. About a human medic named Kyle, who explained each wound and never once raised his voice. She spoke of how humans treated her pain without judgment. How they asked before touching her. How they waited when she was afraid. How they saved her because she was alive. The elders listened. No one interrupted. Ari spoke of the moment she was offered freedom. How the door had been open. How she could have left without a word. How she chose to stay longer not because she was forced but because she wanted to understand. Why? An elder asked quietly. Because fear teaches nothing, Ari replied. And they did not fear me. The elders grew still. They healed instead of destroyed, Ari continued. They chose restraint when they had power. They chose care when they could have chosen control. Some elders frowned. Others looked thoughtful. You expect us to believe humans are kind? One elder asked. Ari met their gaze. I expect you to believe they are complex. As we are. She spoke until her voice grew tired. When she finished, the room remained quiet for a long time. Finally, the oldest elder stood. Stories shape our people, the elder said. Yours will be questioned. Ari nodded. It should be. The elders dismissed her without judgment or praise. Ari left the hall and stepped into the open air. The sky above her home world was wide and familiar. She felt lighter just breathing it. Over the following days, Ari's story spread beyond the council. Warriors asked her questions in training yards. Young ones listened with wide eyes. Travelers carried her words to distant cities and outposts. At first, many did not believe her. Humans were enemies. Humans were destroyers. Humans were not healers. But Ari did not argue. She answered calmly. She repeated the same truths. She did not exaggerate. She did not hide her confusion. She spoke of fear and how it slowly changed into respect. Others began to share their own stories. A trader spoke of humans who repaired a broken station instead of claiming it. A pilot spoke of human ships that stayed behind to guide refugees through dangerous space. Slowly, quietly, the pattern formed. Across the stars, the story traveled. Not as a loud announcement. Not as a command. But as a shared memory. Ari returned to her training hall one evening and watched young warriors practice. She saw strength in their movements, pride in their stance. She also saw fear in their eyes when humans were mentioned. She stepped forward and spoke to them. Strength is not only how hard you strike, she said. It is also how carefully you choose not to. Some listened. Some did not. But seeds were planted. Months passed. Diplomatic messages began to change in tone. Where warnings once stood, questions appeared. Where borders were sealed, small windows opened. Ari often thought of Sarah and Kyle. She wondered if they knew the effect of their choices. She wondered if they would ever hear how far their kindness had reached. One night, as she stood beneath the stars, Ari realized something important. Legends were not born from battles alone. They were born from moments where someone chose a different path. Her people would not change overnight. Fear had deep roots. But now there was another story walking beside it. A story of humans who healed instead of destroyed. And that was enough to begin. Far across space, on human worlds and alien ones, the legend shifted. Not loudly. Not quickly. But forever.